Welcome back. Lawyers for Human Rights says there are 15 million undocumented people in South Africa. This was revealed in Parliament when the non-profit organisation made a presentation to the Home Affairs Portfolio Committee. The group has also highlighted challenges faced by migrants in the country. For more on the story, we're joined now by a senior attorney at Lawyers for Human Rights, Lindokuhle Mdabe, joins us via our video link this morning. Good morning, Lindokuhle. It's great to have you with us on the programme on such an important issue. And part of that presentation you made in Parliament also talked about the systematic and structural xenophobia faced by asylum seekers and refugees in South Africa.
Yeah, so we highlighted a couple of issues, given that we were not making the submissions at the same time with the Department of Home Affairs, and given that we were working with limited numbers and statistical sources, and so the 15 million figure that is now on part of the public discourse is the figure that we obtained from the Reserve Bank data set. And we also highlighted some structural xenophobic issues which are beyond really what is happening at the Home Affairs, which cut across all government departments and other private institutions.
So take us through this number, the 15 million people that are undocumented in South Africa. Does that include South Africans and people from other countries as well, or are we just talking South Africans when we talk about these 15 million undocumented?
From the Reserve Bank, World Bank report, the number seems to include South Africans and non-South Africans. So it includes a broad range of a broad category of people. So it would be people who could be stateless. It could be people who are asylum seekers and refugees and other migrants, and basically people who would have had their IDs blocked, or people who are not part of the bed registration system.
Just a step back, sort of, in our conversation, you said it was these numbers were from the World Bank. Is that right?
Yes.
And how do they get those numbers, given that the people are undocumented?
Well, we're not sure, but we got the report from the World Bank itself, but I can't tell you how they the number and what is the methodology around it. But one would assume that this information was shared with the World Bank by the Department of Home Affairs.
Of course, it has various permutations, right? A number like this, that 15 million people are undocumented. There's the issue we started off the conversation with around the treatment of migrants to our country, of asylum seekers, the fact that they need to pay bribes, the fact that they wait so long to actually get an interview at Home Affairs. The permutations are numerous insofar as the treatment of these people and their inability in many cases to get the documentation that's needed.
Yeah, I think getting documents is the first step, but our biggest worry with the situation is that people are unable to integrate into society because they don't have access to socio-economic facilities and even private facilities. For instance, if I could give you an example, people do not have, they have limited access to hospitals. Nowadays, we are told that people are having to pay at hospital to give birth. We also know that the private institutions like the banks are now deregistering accounts of people who have documents that are expired, and it has enormous impact on people's livelihood and their capacity to make a decent living in this country.
In your experience in dealing with this issue as Lawyers for Human Rights, do you find that there is urgency enough from the Department of Home Affairs in South Africa to address this?
Look, there is. One cannot really doubt the department's commitment to address some of these issues. But obviously, the department does need a lot of capacity, and a lot of personnel to address the numbers that are there. The numbers that are there have been there for the longest time. There's a backlog project which seems to cover applications as far back as 2012, and that is also compounded by the online system which started post-COVID, which also has its own backlog. So the effect of that is that people who are coming into the country, the newcomers, are still outside of that system. They still remain undocumented, and to be documented is really it makes migrants to be vulnerable to any act of xenophobia by any government authority. For instance, we know that they get detained, and they sometimes they're asked to pay bribes so that they can be released, and that happens all the time. That seems to be a norm now. So that is how they leave. That is the biggest complaint about documentation.
Yeah. As you say, leaves already vulnerable group of people, asylum seekers, open to even more abuse. So as lawyers for human rights, when you were making this presentation in Parliament, what were some of the things you were asking the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs to do in terms of pressuring or just pushing the department itself to make a move insofar as this issue is concerned? I'm talking about access to hospitals, education, banking, for example, so that even though this person doesn't have the relevant documentation, to enable them to still receive help with some kind of letter from the Department of Home Affairs.
Yeah, because the Department of Home Affairs do not issue such letters, that responsibility has fallen on NGOs, and particularly lawyers for human rights. We've been doing that throughout the country. We've been assisting people with letters, trying to explain to hospitals and schools that our client communities have a right to access these facilities as a matter of law, and that this right arises from the Constitution itself. And we have been getting success in that regard, but one would require something much more systematic than that, because we are assisting individuals, we are assisting on isolated incidents. So we would want perhaps the Department of Home Affairs to make this clear to other departments of government that these people still have access to, should have access rather to these public and private facilities, despite the fact that their documents have not been fully processed by the Department of Home Affairs.
Is there a deadline that's been given, or rather a date for a report back to Parliament?
Not yet. So what we did was we tabled our submissions after Home Affairs, and they tabled theirs on a different date. But we got an undertaking from the chairperson of the standing committee, the parliamentary committee, that they're going to call on the department to give response to some of our questions and our suggestions for solutions. We haven't been given a specific date yet, but we're waiting to hear from the department itself what is it going to do about some of these challenges.
Yeah, certainly a story we'll keep our eyes on as well. Lindokuhle Mdabe, let me thank you for your time this morning. He is a senior attorney at Lawyers for Human Rights.